turning, Dr. Durning, to your search for Jeremy Christian's autism at the request of his attorneys. You, in your report, you documented very thoroughly that you did everything really you could think of at your disposal to find autism, right?
To evaluate it, not to find it.
But you, I believe you even said you didn't want to leave any stones unturned in that area.
I believe I said that about Mr. Scholl.
Okay. Well, what about you? Did you?
I wanted to do a thorough evaluation, yes.
Okay. But despite all of that, in your report, you write, autism spectrum disorder cannot fully account for...
Could you direct me where we are?
Sure.
Thank you.
That may take me a second.
Okay.
And I'm going to keep looking here, but the quote from your report is, autism spectrum disorder cannot fully account for or explain...
If you don't mind, I'd like to read it.
...his behavior on the MAX train. Just that I'll help you find it, because that's the quote. And I'll look as well.
While he's doing with that, can I talk to counsel over here real quick?
Okay. Ms. Najari is telling me it's on page 3.
Oh. Thank you. And which paragraph? So I can find...
Fourth paragraph.
Okay.
And the quote was, autism spectrum disorder cannot fully account for or explain his behavior on the MAX train.
Correct.
You wrote that.
Yes.
And then you wrote other factors were at play. You included his drinking alcohol, parenthetically sangria, apparently, perhaps consuming other drugs like marijuana, or parenthetically others, being locked up and exposed to violence in prison for 10 years beginning at age 19, possibly having a PTSD flashback in the moment of the confrontation, right?
Correct.
So you wrote in the report that autism spectrum disorder can't fully account for what happened, right?
Indeed, that's right.
Okay. And speaking of PTSD, you didn't diagnose PTSD, right?
No, I did not.
Okay. And regarding the armed robbery of the convenience store, you also wrote, autism did not cause Christian to rob the store. It did not take over his reasoning powers.
Correct.
And most people with autism spectrum disorder don't commit crimes, do they?
No, they don't.
In fact, those sorts of people may be vulnerable to crimes.
Yes, they're often manipulated, right, and vulnerable.
You didn't, in your story about Hans Asperger, the Nazi doctor, you didn't get to the part that you footnoted in your report that he actually put those children to death.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the very last thing you said.
Hans Asperger, the Nazi doctor,
Yes.
he put those children to death.
We signed death certificates. There's a couple of certificates for children.
Because he thought they were defective.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm sorry, Your Honor, how are we on time?
We're okay, but we'll leave the end close to 5.
Okay.
Just so everybody knows, Dr. Durning is available tomorrow.
Okay. In your report, you note that autism spectrum disorder does not happen all of a sudden. You wrote, traces of autism are expected in the psychosocial history and functioning of affected individuals.
Right.
And that means in plain language, that you don't just get it when you turn 30, right?
Correct. Schizophrenia, for example, may emerge in the 20s, and you don't have traces of that. I was trying to be very open in my evaluation and talking about things that we expect that weren't there for Mr. Christian.
Right, I appreciate that. And yeah, schizophrenia, for example, you might have someone who had a normal childhood, goes through high school, is on the football team, start college, and all of a sudden they go completely off the rails and they drop out of school and they're hearing voices and they end up in the street, the whole thing, right? Autism spectrum disorder, you explain in your report, usually shows up.
Could you direct me to where we are? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Follow along, read it.
Maybe Ms. Hajari can help me, but you wrote it usually shows up when the child is between the ages of 2 and 5. Is that right?
Yes.